So, picture this. It's 525 BC. The Egyptian Empire, a civilization that has stood for thousands of years, just collapses in a single battle. But how it all went down is probably one of the weirdest and most argued over stories in all of military history. Let's get into it.
What you're looking at right now is an artist's idea of the Battle of Pelusium. And if you lean in a little closer, you'll see the craziest part of the whole legend. See, the Persian soldiers aren't just carrying swords and shields, they're using animals. And not just any animals, but specifically cats.
I know, it sounds absolutely unbelievable. And that really brings us to the core question here. Could an army using cats and other sacred animals really be the secret weapon that brought down the most powerful kingdom on Earth? To really get our heads around this, we have to start with the most famous version of the story. And honestly, it's a total masterpiece of what we'd now call psychological warfare.
The strategy was, you gotta admit, kind of brilliant. The Egyptians worshipped a whole pantheon of gods, including the cat goddess Bastet. Cats were sacred. So, the Persian king Cambyses II supposedly told his men to just hold cats as they marched forward. The Egyptian archers, terrified of hurting one of these animals and facing the wrath of the gods, were basically paralyzed. They couldn't shoot.
It's an incredible story, right? It's the kind of thing you tell your friends. But, like with most things that sound a little too good to be true, there's a pretty good chance it's not the whole story. To get closer to the truth, we need to rewind, way before the battle, to a drama of palace intrigue and some serious personal betrayal.
You see, the real reason for this war probably wasn't sown on a battlefield. It all started in the royal courts, and it was fueled by a deep personal insult. So this massive war didn't kick off with armies. It started with a messed up marriage proposal. The Persian king, Cambyses, asks to marry the pharaoh's daughter, but the pharaoh, Amises, he doesn't want to send his own kid, so instead, he sends the daughter of a former defeated pharaoh. Well, when this princess, Herodotus, gets to Persia, she spills the beans, and Cambyses is understandably furious. And that personal anger was about to get a huge strategic boost from a guy on the inside. And this is the man who changes everything, Phanes of Halicarnassus. He was a Greek mercenary, a top advisor to the pharaoh, but after they had some kind of falling out, Amasis sent an assassin to kill him. Phanes gets away, flees to Persia, and basically hands Cambyses the entire playbook for how to invade and conquer Egypt. His betrayal turned a personal grudge into a full-blown war plan. So now Cambyses has a reason for revenge and a perfect plan to get it. He sets his sights on the Nile. But first things first, he had to get his army there. You know, Egypt's greatest defense had always been its geography. Getting a massive army across that huge, brutal desert was a logistical nightmare. But Cambyses was clever. He made a crucial alliance with an Arabian king who didn't just give him safe passage. He gave him troops and, the most important thing of all, water.
And right as this massive Persian war machine is getting ready to roll, Egypt gets hit with an absolute disaster course of bad luck. First, the savvy old pharaoh Amasis, who'd been navigating all this, dies. His young, totally inexperienced son, Psamtik III, takes the throne. And then, to make things even worse, Egypt's most important Greek naval allies basically see which way the wind is blowing and flip, joining the Persians.
So the stage is set. You've got an enraged Persian king with a giant army and an insider's map to victory, squaring off against a brand new, untested pharaoh with a weakened and demoralized force. It's not looking good for Egypt. Right before the big battle, the new pharaoh Psamtik does something truly brutal and desperate. He takes the sons of that traitor, Phanes, has them brought before the army, and kills them. And then, according to the historian Herodotus, he makes his commanders drink their blood mixed with wine. It was this horrifying act meant to forge like a blood pact of vengeance before the fighting started.
It didn't work. The battle was a complete slaughter. I mean, whether it was because of cats or just better tactics, the result was a total Persian victory. The numbers, which we get from the historian Cambyses, are just staggering. 50,000 Egyptians lost their lives. And the Persians? They lost just 7,000. It was an absolute rout.
The survivors who could, they fled to the capital city, Memphis. And in one final defiant act, when a Persian messenger came to offer surrender terms, they killed him and his entire crew. Well, that just sealed their fate. Cambyses laid siege to the city, it fell, and the last pharaoh of an independent Egypt was taken prisoner.
And this right here, this is the end of an era captured in a single moment. The defeated pharaoh Psamtik III is brought before his conqueror, Cambyses. And just like that, 3,000 years of Egyptian sovereignty were over. Egypt was now just another province in the massive Persian Empire.
You know, history is filled with these really strange, unforgettable details. When Herodotus, that historian, visited the battlefield years later, he claimed he could actually tell the difference between the skulls of the dead. The Egyptian skulls, he wrote, were thicker, and he figured it was because they shaved their heads from the time they were babies, which hardened the bone in the sun. It's a bizarre little detail, but it's one you don't forget.
Okay, so this brings us all the way back to the beginning. We've got two completely different stories about this battle. One is this dramatic tale about weaponized cats. The other is a much more complicated story of revenge and betrayal. So where did these two different versions even come from? Well, the answer really comes down to timing. Herodotus, who we call the father of history, he wrote his version pretty close to when all this actually happened. He talks all about the royal insults, the betrayal of Phanes, the whole deal, but he never, not once, mentions the cat strategy. That story, it comes from a guy named Polyaenus, who was writing 700 years after the battle took place.
So, who was this Polyaenus guy? Well, what modern historians tell us is that he was more of a storyteller. He was collecting cool military anecdotes and was often, and I'm quoting here, more interested in novelty than historical accuracy. He wasn't really trying to document history. He was trying to entertain people.
And that really leaves us with a fascinating question, doesn't it? The story about royal betrayal and shifting alliances is almost certainly closer to the historical truth. But the legend of an army using cats to bring down an entire empire, that's the story we all remember. It kind of makes you wonder, 1,000 years from now, what stories will people tell about us that are memorable but maybe not exactly true?